Therefore, all the true acharyas, such as Venerable Ajaan, have always looked upon the process of eating food as being a most important routine. When they eat food, the bhikkhus all eat together, and however many of them there may be, it seems to each one as if he is alone with no other bhikkhus present, because they do not talk together, and each one of them is concerned only with his own practice, self-controlled and peaceful. This comes from their belief that eating food is a routine in which they should take some interest, for it is an aspect of Dhamma in the same way as all the other routines that they follow. Chapter 16. The Customs of Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhus. The tradition of respect and reverence for their teachers and each other. It is a tradition amongst Kammaṭṭhāna Bhikkhus to have great respect and reverence for their leaders. When eating food, if the leader has not started eating, the others wait until he has begun. Then they begin from the next most senior, going down the line to the most junior. If the teacher, the acharya, or the chief bhikkhu is not present, they then pay respect to the next most senior. This is generally the way they have practiced in most Kammaṭṭhāna monasteries, right up to the present day, and there does not appear to have been any change in it. But how it will be in the future is rather uncertain, because the world is changing rapidly and, as they say, progressing day by day, and it may be that Kammaṭṭhāna bhikkhus will also change and progress in the same direction as the rest of the world. For everyone wants progress, and the bhikkhus and samaneras are people with hearts and minds, the same as everyone else, and it would be rather strange if they did not want progress in the same way as all the others. As for the senior bhikkhus, they are very old and have enough long years of experience in the ways of the world and of Dhamma, and whatever progress or regress takes place, they are probably not capable of knowing much about it. They are mostly old and venerable, looking after their monasteries where they want to take their last breath and reach the end of the life of the kilesas, and they are passing away day by day. As for myself, writing this book, I am in a different situation, for I just go on writing, which is like the old venerable ones, but without thinking whether any of the bhikkhus will be interested in it or not. I just keep on writing, as if my ears and eyes are closed to anything else, so please don't take offense at any of it. While you are reading, please just skip over any sentences or paragraphs which are not essential and could be left out. You can save time and put it to use in doing other things which are more valuable and more essential. Then you will be someone who knows the value of time. In the case of Venerable Ajaan, before he started eating, he contemplated for a long time, as if he were doing a meditation practice. Some days in the evening, or at night, when it was opportune, he would with metta tell us about the contemplative investigation, the vicārana paccavakkana, which is used at the time of eating food. He said, Dhamma always tends to become apparent while eating. Sometimes it brings various skillful ways which stick fast in one's mind, so that one follows and thinks about them for many days. At other times it can give rise to revulsion and weariness for the food in one's bowl, which can reach the point where the citta is so disenchanted with food that there is no desire to eat. Here he is referring to the time when he was practicing the way very strictly and putting everything he had got into it. He went on to say, when any perceptions arise which conflict with Dhamma, one must use an effective method to overcome and cure those kilesas which are tired of oneself and of food, with one's full strength, so that the citta will be able to accept this method and go down into its natural state of truth, which is the middle way. Otherwise, the citta would never agree to eat food at all, for it sees the food in the bowl as being nothing but shit. At such a time, being compelled to eat is rather like someone who is forced to go to the charnel ground to admire the beauty of the dead bodies. I had to investigate with all my strength to find a way to cure this kind of kilesa, which I had never truly met before and which was obscuring my understanding. This I did in the same way as contemplating the beautiful and seeing it as loathsome. The citta was then able to return to its normal state, and I could then eat as usual. After that, I had to use many different ways in association with it, such as to set up comprehension and knowing, to set up circumspection, to set up fear, and to set up strength and determination, and to change them about as required. But the fact that the citta displayed a state of knowing those characteristics which arose was good in one way, for it made my satipanya skillful, adaptable, and fit for use in all sorts of different ways to keep up with the endless tricks of the kilesas which deceive and lead one astray. The more my chitta gained bold, venturesome, and energetic tendencies, the less I was able to investigate vicharana in the more usual ways. I had to go for those kilesas which are impostors until I could get right at them. Therefore, I am always able to speak with full confidence and say that the best and most important weapons in one's investigations into all forms of Dhamma, both gross and subtle, are sati and panya. With these two superb instruments present, I did not lose out easily to the kilesas, as in the investigation into the food in my bowl, to see it as loathsome for the purpose of cutting away at the concern and delusion associated with taste, and so that the food is seen as mere elementary materials, or as just those conditions, Dhamma, that I had to depend on to live from day to day. But when this happened, and I saw it in this way in my citta while doing the investigation, it changed and became wearied and averse, which increased until it became revulsion, so strong that I could not fight against it and go on eating, as if such foods had never been things that supported life and nourished the material elements, the dhatu and the khandhas. This kind of aversion is the way of the world, and it is in this same way that people everywhere have aversion. This aversion conceals Dhamma, and it is not the middle way which the Lord taught us to follow. He went on to say, it was this kind of aversion that, in the time of the Buddha, made some of the Bhikkhus so averse towards themselves that they themselves hired someone to come and kill them, which is the wrong way of aversion. This is also the kind of aversion that causes a cramped, clogged-up state internally, in which the heart has no room to move nor freedom. In this state the heart manages to produce a kilesa of a subtle kind without realizing it, and it believes in it completely. But I was able to catch and arrest the tricks of this kilesa which arose when I became averse to food, for my sati and panya were already well up to dealing with its tricks and the disguises which it displayed, as well as its offspring and many relatives, spreading out into aversion for parts of the body, for life and existence. After I had investigated and found out what this aversion was all about, my citta went calm and quieted down, and true seeing of a particular kind arose in its place. Since then I have always upheld that Dhamma as a basic principle, and this aversion as a lesson to be learned. For regardless of however I investigated, inwardly or outwardly, widespread or narrowly confined, grossly or subtly, and to whatever extent, I had to have a strategy of both retreating and going forward to attack. In other words, investigating and reviewing, going forwards and backwards, in order to get thoroughly and circumspectly into the subtleties of whatever I was dealing with. After that occasion, when I became averse to eating food, I never again let myself go free of control to contemplate in the usual way of people. The exceptional nature of what I came to know at that time sharpened my sati and panya considerably, as a knife is sharpened on a grindstone, making me lose all complacency in everything. Apart from investigating and reviewing with sati and panya in this way, until I was satisfied that I could not find anything within myself that contradicted this knowledge, the result that came from such investigations was an absolute and intimate certainty of heart in every aspect of Dhamma. This is why I am able to speak with full confidence and certainty, and to be absolutely sure that whatever you go after, you will get. If you go after stupidity, you will just get stupidity. If you go after cleverness, you will get cleverness. If you go after greed, you will just get greed. If you go after anger, you will just get a heart full of anger. Go after evil, and you get evil. Go after good, and you get good. Or, in more detail, look for demerit, and you just get demerit. Look for merit, and you just get merit. Look for hell, and you just get hell, that which burns you up. Look for heaven, and you get heaven. But even if you look for nibbana, you still cannot get free from striving and searching, which is no other than the fundamental causes which are searching and acting. For there have been those who have sought and got the results that come from these causes of searching and acting long ages before we were born. In fact, we may reckon ever since the earth gave rise to animals and people, as we conventionally suppose. So, blindly and stupidly to deny evil, happiness, and dukkha is to obstruct our own way forward, to make ourselves stupid and to waste our time. To what purpose? If it is true, as we suppose, that human beings are more clever than animals, then that view must be seen as absolutely meaningless. Being born and then dying uselessly because our own stupidity kills us, as if we were our own executioners. There! That's the truth, and those who are ready to think about this should hurry up and do so. Don't just sit about in dull self-satisfaction, merely standing, walking, sitting, and lying about, gathering more stupidity and living vainly. For when you die, you will have wasted all your time, as well as all the food, the cloth, and all the other things which the lay people donate. For they are anxious to make merit so as to help and support those who have been ordained out of faith and hope for the final goal, and have also set themselves to get rid of all the kilesas and to expel them entirely from their hearts. But when the satipanya in one's heart is no greater than a grain of sand, it is no more able to kill off any of the kilesas than the bite of a flea or a mosquito. For what reason should the kilesas die, when satipanya and the effort one is putting forth are still so meager? What is going to kill them? This makes me feel at present that I have about come to the end of my satipanya in sympathy with all of you. At the end of his talk, Venerable Ajaan probably felt vexed and frustrated, so he aimed a blow at us, so that he would not spoil the status of one who was supreme in the circle of the sasana in this present age. Steadily and continually contemplating with satipanya present, even while taking food, is what makes it possible for the illuminating flow of Dhamma to shine forth and arise whenever it will, for there is no special time for it to arise, as Venerable Ajaan Mun so graciously instructed us, telling us about both what things are wrong and what are right, and it seemed to act as a method which developed satipanya in those who were interested. In regard to the feeling of weariness of eating which arises from the contemplation of food just before starting to eat, even some of the white-robed upasikas were rather like Venerable Ajaan in this, but I won't go further into this just now. But there is one case which is worth considering, at the time when Venerable Ajaan was staying at Wat Nong Peo in Sagon Nakhon. There was an upasika who came and told him how she had been unable to take any food for 2 or 3 days, because of her revulsion and weariness for food, as well as for all parts of her body, and of other people's also. She had become wearied of food, of the body, and of life in all situations associated with the body. She was unable to sleep, and when she looked at any food, which previously she had always thought of as being sustenance for the body and mind, she saw it instead as being so repulsive that she could not bring herself to take it and swallow it. When she looked at her own body and the bodies of other people, they seemed utterly repulsive throughout, as if they were living corpses in a charnel ground, decaying all the time, and there was no part she could find that was not utterly repulsive and corpse-like. Apart from being wearied of food, she was also tired of herself, of her clothes, and everything she used in the place where she slept. She was tired of living, tired of the whole world, and she could find nothing which she liked or loved, and which could persuade her that it was worth staying with it. In all postures of the body, she was always spitting, which was because of the vision of loathsomeness, Paṭipadā sanya, that was waiting there to remind her the whole time. Venerable Ajaan then taught her with metta and explained her situation to her by talking directly and forcefully, which went straight to her heart, so that the upasika realized and accepted that her understanding and ways of thought had been completely wrong and had deceived her into going beyond the limits of what is reasonable in Dhamma. She herself said, "From the time that I paid respect to Venerable Ajaan to receive his teaching, and he asked me about what had happened, I had faith in him and told him, and I have practiced what he taught me continually ever since. As for those experiences, they disappeared and have never returned again." This story is worth thinking about for those who practice the way and who tend to have strange experiences, for this happens with a few people who frequently have such experiences, both those which are right and true, as well as those which are wrong and false. If they have no acharya who is readily available to advise and to guide them, they may easily get wrong ideas and views, while at the same time believing that they are right. This is why satipanya is such an important aspect of Dhamma for those who practice the way of Dhamma at all levels, and one should never let it be far away from oneself. the way of practice in which people are too relaxed, easy, and comfortable, which lacks precision and does not go into the detail of what is being done in the practice, may make them appear as sad and miserable in the eyes of others and a spectacle that arouses pity. This is because of their slick and facile knowledge and understanding, and because of their tendency to spread it about to others without having first thought about it and examined it with circumspection before bringing it out and putting it to use. The practice and the results which such people get will not become outstanding, but will deteriorate, because their careless lack of circumspection gets into their practice and breaks it up. The foregoing paragraph is something which those who practice Dhamma should take to heart and pay special attention to, and unless it is truly beyond the scope of their satipanya, they should not let it happen. This is due to the fact that Dhamma is not the same as the world, for it is very much more subtle and profound. The standards which the world upholds in thinking, speaking, and acting are not wrong, but if those who practice the way of Dhamma refuse to accord with Dhamma, and go about thinking, speaking, and acting in the manner of the world, they are at once grievously wrong, because the standards of the world and of Dhamma are quite different in regard to their gross vulgarity and subtle sublimity. For example, in the world, they learn and teach things in various grades and levels in accordance with existing regulations and traditions, and when they are tested and examined, they must receive a certificate or diploma to show and prove that they have passed such and such levels of learning. This makes it easy and convenient to find work which is associated with those subjects they have learnt, and it gives them status and a good name in accordance with those conventions of the world which the world has decreed. But to practice the way of Dhamma by thinking, speaking, and acting in the manner of people in the world, such as in the above example by taking examinations, and by one's marks to establish that one has passed such and such a level, or that one has reached Samadhi Samapatti, or Arhatta Magga and Arhatta Phala, would be to go contrary to the nature and customs of those who practice Dhamma. Then Dhamma would be turned into a thing of the world. In fact, even more coarse and vulgar than the normal way of the world. Instead of attracting people and eliciting their praises, due to the ways and actions of those who practice this Dhamma, it makes them wearied of it and disheartened. In order for them to maintain a state of harmony and virtue, those who practice with the intention of attaining Dhamma, which is a state of peace and certainty in themselves, should get into the way of calm. Even those who have attained the level of Arhatta Phala and know by way of Sandirtiko or Paccattāng Vedetabbo Vinyuhi in their purity of heart, never make any outward display like people in the world, which only comes from craving and hunger. So in this way they uphold the honor both of themselves and of Buddhism in the most subtle and gentle way, without becoming involved in any disturbance. For such disturbance creates waves that wash over the banks, and this is nothing but the way of the world entirely, where there is none of the truth of Dhamma, not even the outer skin, despite the claims of those who do this sort of thing. This is also what is meant by the wearisome Dhamma. Is it possible for other people to know who has accomplished Dhamma? Yes, it is possible, by the way of reasoning, when answers are given to questions when two people who equally practice the way and who are of equal attainment talk together. It is also possible to know by the way that someone explains Dhamma in the field of practice concerning Citta Bhavana, and it is also possible to know by the Dhamma explanation given by someone who has come to ask and learn about some point or aspect in his practice of Citta Bhavana where he is stuck and cannot see his way through. This obstacle is at his own level of development, and the explanation will be given at the same level, until he understands and his doubts about that point are cleared away. As an example of this, someone who practices the way may be stuck at the point where he is dealing with avidya, and he is truly in the position where he can get free from avidya, but he does not know how the citta should act toward it so that it can get free from it at that moment. Someone who has already gone free from avidya will probably answer him at once and with ease, and the one who is ready to walk free from the realm of avidya will gradually understand the meaning of what he is told, or he may understand and go right through to freedom at that moment, due to the skillful way in which he is given the essential data to clear the way. But if the citta of the teacher has not yet attained freedom, he will not be able to explain rightly or truly concerning this question about avidya, And this is so even if he has learnt all about avidya, because the avidya that he has learnt and remembered is not the same as the true nature of avidya. They are not one and the same thing at all. One who knows the true avidya has no doubts about it, even though he may not have studied and learnt about its cunning deceptive tricks which are so widespread and many, nor would he be fascinated by and attached to avidya. This is the same as someone who knows the true abhidhamma, for even though he may not have learnt it or studied it widely, he has no doubts about it, and he is not fascinated by nor attached to it. This is very different from someone who studies avidya and studies the abhidhamma, but who does not know the true basis of either of them. On the other hand, if he has both learnt and known them truly, he will understand them even though nobody told him anything. Because the one who does not understand and the one who understands these forms of Dhamma are actors on the same stage. So he has reached the end of that path which wants to know and to see what those forms of Dhamma are like. This is like the owner of a cow who is looking for it and wants to find it. Then he sees the footprints of the cow and becomes fascinated and attached to following up its footprints. He goes on without giving up until he reaches the cow, but as soon as he has found the cow, he immediately stops following its footprints. When you, who read this, come across some forest eloquence, I hope you will excuse me, for I am strongly imbued with the forest and its wild ways, and lack of any rules or principles. Because within the forest bhikkhus there is nothing but the wild Dhamma that makes one head spin, and hardly any of the kind that makes one feel delighted. So please practice it by yourselves until you realize it for yourselves. You will then become convinced and feel a satisfaction that you have accomplished something, for more than you ever will by reading and listening to others. Because the understanding which comes from what others say, or from the textbooks, is all within the field of discursive commentary. Before it is accepted and the heart can agree to believe it, there must be an intense internal struggle and a testing criticism of what has been heard or read. Sometimes one can even lose out to oneself, believing that oneself has the upper hand, because deciding or weighing up what one has read is one's own opinion. For generally speaking, we who follow the way of the sasana tend to send our thoughts out externally rather than going inwardly, and the results which we get tend to be in the direction of loss to oneself all the time. The method which Venerable Ajaan used to cure his own chitta, and that woman's also, making it turn away from the seeing of loathsomeness, paṭipadā sanya, which made him wearied of food, of life, and of living in physical existence in his own body, which was the same as he taught that woman also, is a thing of great interest to all those who are liable to come across this problem which they may have to face up to one day. Therefore I shall relate some of what Venerable Ajaan said as far as I can remember it. Venerable Ajaan said how that woman felt about food much in the same way as he had done, for he did the contemplation of the loathsomeness of food, both in regard to the fresh food mixed up in his bowl and the old food mixed up in his body, and he compared the two together, taking the internal food as the basis of the comparison of loathsomeness. After having done this contemplation, and comparing them together in full force and for long enough, the food in his bowl gradually seemed to change its nature from that which is wholesome and fit to eat, until it became just as loathsome as the food inside the body. This was seen with absolute clarity, and gave rise to a feeling of disenchantment and weariness which steadily increased. But fortunately at that time he was living alone, which meant that he was able to get down to examining this phenomenon and to correct it with all his strength of ability over quite a long period of time. His chitta then steadily gave way, accepted the truth, and he was able to eat normally. But the way he did this will be described later, when we come to the way he taught that woman, for the basic Dhamma is the same in both cases. It seems, however, that after this experience, Venerable Ajaan was able to see the extraordinary versatility of the chitta, and how it can adapt to an endless variety of states and situations. This led him to improve the carefulness and thoroughness with which he did his investigation or research, beyond what he had been used to, with the aim of gaining greater subtlety and precision. He did this by using the method of changing about, using many tactics to attack the problem from different angles and levels, until he was satisfied and certain about it, and no room was left for any mistakes to remain. His chitta therefore must have continued to become steadily more clever and skilled at investigating without ever stopping. When Venerable Ajaan went to stay at Wat Nong Peo, the above-mentioned woman came to him and told him of her experiences, which were very like those which he also had experienced. So he took the opportunity to explain the situation to her. All the bhikkhus and samaneras in the Wat left whatever they were doing and also came to listen to this special Dhamma talk, which he gave by using his own experiences as the basis of his explanation. He said, "This kind of thing that this lady has experienced, I also have experienced, and I have understood the tricky deceptiveness of the kilesas of the kind which act as impostors, disguising and obscuring their nature. To illustrate this, they are like great thieves who act as though they are good people in high society. Their clothes are good, and they dress elegantly and stylishly as if they were Lord Sakka, the king of the gods, or Lady Sugata from heaven, and walking amongst people in society at all levels without arousing any suspicions at all that they are in fact beings from hell in the guise of people, so they can live and go about in comfort in a bold and stately manner, as though they were people of great wisdom, purity, and impeccability, and this makes them difficult to catch out. Because the function or organization that produces such phenomena are beyond the ability of most people to notice and to question. Only those who have keen discernment, skilled wisdom, and who have been trained to know the tricks of these entities, especially in this particular way, can see through them, even as a police detective is fully up to the tricks of such a rogue and can catch him and bring him to justice. But with other people, they play on their vanity until they have squeezed everything out of them. Such is the character of this group of kilesas. They wait their chance and penetrate into the Dhamma teaching of loathsomeness where wisdom has not yet reached or penetrated, wherever they can. As for the intended purpose of the Dhamma practice, which investigates to see food as loathsome, its purpose is to cut off the greed and delusion associated with food, which binds the citta to anxiety and melancholy states. But the practice of seeing loathsomeness is not intended to make people fast until they commit suicide, which is the way of these kilesas, for they overshadow the place where Dhamma is located so that they can go about doing what they want to do by going the way of the world, which is dragged along to aid and support them. But loathsomeness is also a factor of Dhamma, which means that whatever is loathsome is to be known as loathsome. As for those things that one has to depend on in this life, one just has to accept that one has got to depend on them throughout the life of these khantas. So, on the one hand, there is the body, which is a loathsome thing, and on the other hand, there is food, which is a loathsome thing also. As they are both loathsome, they can come together in harmony, and there is no cause for them to reject each other. One should not separate the two and refuse to take food, which is a mistaken view that follows the lead of those kilesas of the kind which act as impostors, disguising and obscuring their own nature. But the one who does the investigation is the heart, and it is quite separate and apart from those loathsome things, and is not soiled or stained by them in any way that should give rise to such disaffection and loathing that it cannot even consider them. Dhamma is always just sufficient and suitable in every aspect of Dhamma, and all the techniques of investigation into any part or thing is all for the purpose of getting Dhamma, which is a state of sufficiency, satisfaction, and not going against the grain. But investigating against the grain until food, the body, and the heart cannot agree together is precisely the way of the kilesas, and there is no doubt as to whether it is something that one should take up and go on developing or not. In fact, one must then go on investigating, until the external and the internal loathsomeness can be brought together, while the heart remains happily in the middle. This is the right way, and accords with the intended purpose of Dhamma, without any one-sided bias such as you have at present. In this way, loathsomeness is an instrument of Dhamma for curing that self-forgetfulness which assumes that this thing is beautiful, or that thing is wonderfully tasty, how I love to eat it. But once the investigation has been done until the chitta has gone beyond this type of self-forgetfulness, who would want to dig up and carry all this loathsomeness into Nibbana? For all this is just the path leading to Nibbana, which is Dhamma that has no attachment or relationship with anything in the relative universe, sammuti. When the chitta is attached to beauty, then one should take up the Dhamma of loathsomeness to cure it. When attached to hate, one should take up the Dhamma of metta to cure it. And when it is attached to greed,
one should investigate one's own selfishness and self-opinionatedness until one sees it clearly to cure it. But when one is attached to delusion, well, what is called delusion is very deep and profound, and I can only give a brief explanation here, enough to point out the direction, which is to take up the Opanayika Dhamma, that is, to investigate and look at one's own heart that is sunk in delusion concerning those things with which it is involved. This is the way to know oneself, and steadily to bring about a cure. If one gets caught up in anger, then one should examine this anger, which is an inward fire, burning oneself up first before spreading out to burn up other people. One should do so until one can see how baneful, wrong, and harmful one's anger is. When one examines such things to cure them by going right to the spot where they are located, they gradually weaken and die away on their own because there is nothing left to support them, but only that which cools the passions. Where then can the Kilesas get their food from to keep them well fed and fat so that they may live long into the future? When also there is nobody there who is ready to help them and develop them, they are surely bound to die like an animal without an owner. Have you ever seen in the story of the Lord Buddha and the Sawakas how they acted? Did they promote or destroy the Kilesas? What kind of result did they get from this? Was it not something wonderful? And where is it possible to find people in the world who are their equal? But why then do we do nothing but promoting, supporting, and looking after the Kilesas with such an excessive concern for their well-being while taking no interest nor giving a thought about ourselves, even when we are about to die?
We want to have houses, buildings, department stores, halls, hundreds of stories high, and all sorts of clothing, decorations, and adornments. We even want to take the stars in the sky to decorate and beautify ourselves, to scintillate, catch the eye, and touch the heart of the Kilesas, which are insatiable. We want to amass money, silver, and gold in a heap reaching to the sky so that from all points of the compass we can see this mass of wealth belonging just to oneself alone. Even when the place where one stays is so full of one's wealth that there is nowhere left for the owner to live, to rest, to lie down and sleep, one accepts and puts up with the difficulties and inconvenience. All one asks is to have and to get whatever will satisfy the heart of the Kilesas. As to having a wife or husband, however many women or men there are in the world, one wants to go about gathering them all up, so that they belong to oneself alone. Nor does one want to let anyone else become involved and be a nuisance, for that would upset the Kilesas with their great greed, who are the masters of the world sitting on top of the heart. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go on fasting until you die, by doing these counterfeit practices of seeing loathsomeness, or are you ready to do what is reasonable, which is Dhamma with sati and panya, to watch and to make sure that all aspects of the practice are done appropriately in the right proportions? I have also gone through just these experiences until everything seemed offensive and hateful. Therefore I can thus speak with full understanding without any shame or fear of anyone saying I am mad or anything else. This is the nature of the underlying or hidden knowledge of Dhamma, and you must understand it from now on. Amongst those who practice Pāvana, and who get various kinds of knowledge and understanding arising in them, there are some cases in which a foreign Dhamma arises in them, and they have nobody to warn and correct them until they become objects of pity in the eyes of Buddhists and other people as well, just due to this kind of knowledge. You, however, are fortunate in that you have someone to warn you before you reach the point where you are ready to starve yourself to death, or to go about yelling out that you are disgusted with food, with your own body, and with this world, which is full of things which are loathsome, covering the ground which you have always had to depend on so as to have a place to lie down, set up your pillow and your mosquito net, and how all these things emanate a bad and pervasive stench. In fact, that stench does not exist, but it arises out of memory and thought which deceives you until it becomes a firmly fixed belief buried deeply, and from which it is difficult to extricate yourself. This is an appropriate summary of the answer which he gave to that woman who put her problem to him in the form of a question. Now, there is a bit more to it before finishing this story. As soon as Venerable Ajaan finished speaking Dhamma to that woman, she smiled brightly, as if she was no longer the same person who had come to him, burdened down with a load of suffering because of her aversion and disgust. This is all I can remember of the incident, but I am afraid it is only a small part of it, which is most unfortunate. For this Dhamma talk, which told me things that I had never heard before from any other source, only came about by chance, when Venerable Ajaan talked to this woman who brought her problems to him. Before this, nobody had ever come to put this problem to him in circumstances where I was able to listen to such inspiring Dhamma. So I have called it Dhamma to inspire the heart, because it took hold of my heart. It was so indescribably elegant, and the truth that he was displaying went right home. From that time on, he never again brought up this subject to display to anyone else.